primarily comprise this third individual creative business panel. I am Anne-Marie McCaskill Davis. I am the Cultural Funding Specialist Senior with the Cultural Arts Division within the Economic Development Department. I will be here as a role in the role of staff facilitator. Essentially, I'm here as the expert on the Elevate guidelines and will provide any clarification on any issues that are brought up during the panel's deliberation. I'd now like to throw it over to Patricia Hayes, who is our other co-facilitator for the day.
Hello, everyone. Patricia Hayes. I am here as a outside consultant for the City of Austin to help facilitate the process, as Anne-Marie stated, and also just to make sure that we keep balanced with an equity focus and stay on track with the city's goals for this project. And just look forward to being a fly on the wall throughout the process. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Patricia. All right, so at this time, the panelists have reviewed all the applications prior to today. They've provided numeric scores as well as comments. They may change their scores during this session as they hear from other panelists, although it's completely okay for them to not change their scores if they so choose. Each application has a 10-minute maximum time for deliberation. I will be keeping track of that time. If there are any technical issues, we will pause the recording as well as pause the timer. So that way that the technical issues don't eat into the time for an application's deliberation. The panel is not scoring on consensus. It's completely okay for one panelist to have one take on an application and another panelist to have something completely different. The panelists will not be announcing a numeric score. They will be providing overall application comments, including areas that they thought were strong for the application and areas in which the applicant can have future improvement on future applications. The comments will be aligning with the review criteria established in the Elevate guidelines. They will not be taking into consideration information that is not requested within the rubric. For example, financial need is not a consideration in this particular rubric, so they will not be taking that into consideration. Additionally, panelists have been asked to look beyond grantsmanship. If the application has an answer to a question, but not necessarily in this space where the question was asked, but was found elsewhere, including in the backup materials uploaded with the application or in another response, they are allowed to take that into consideration and score that information. Panelists, if they have a conflict of interest, will be recusing themselves from the panel discussion by turning off their camera and muting themselves. And then they will be invited back to the deliberations once that application has been reviewed. Panelists have been assigned as a primary or secondary on all of the applications. Just so that the applicants understand what a primary and secondary is. It doesn't mean that they're the only two people who reviewed your application. It just means that we wanted to assign someone in advance to be familiar enough with the application to introduce it, talk about what the proposal entails, and then provide their first set of comments. And then the secondary is just to ensure that there's at least a second person who's going to provide oral comments during the deliberations. All the panelists are welcome and invited to provide additional commentary for each application, but they are not required to provide additional oral commentary. We ask that applicants request their final scores and comments after awards have been announced in early September. Okay, with that swift introduction, I would like to go ahead and get us started on our very first application of the day. That is Leela, an Indian community theater. Melinda will be the primary, Siri will be the secondary. Let me get the timers ready to go. Melinda, you may begin your comments, and I'll start the timer as soon as you begin speaking.
Okay, can everyone hear me? All right, I'm all set. Okay, so this project is the key constituencies are South Asian in the Indian community and South Asian women, and it consists of story circles and telling the stories of these women through interactive theater performance. I found some of the things that were really strong were the application's description of the target constituencies and the why are they targeting this group. And that is one of the most beautiful things here was that a lot of the Indian community, this application says, has traditionally prioritized professional jobs over pursuing passion. So there's this idea, right, that the arts might kind of fall behind in view of traditional professional jobs. And this project aims to give a space for that sort of expression and participation and nurturing of the arts in that way. It's also focused on women, so it brings in intersectionality in terms of not just the culture, but focus on gender as well. Another plus was I thought that it was really neat that it's including ancient Indian scripture, so going all the way back, the leadership, the cultural leadership is diverse in terms of profession and experience. And then cultural activities, that's where there was some missing details on the tourist accessible activities. I'm wondering if anybody has anything to say about the cultural activities relevance and responsiveness section. And then I thought it was strong in intersectionality, the history, not only what it plans to do with this project, but the history of the work that this organization or project has done already has included multiple identities. And then one other place where it was where there might have been some points lost was in community relationships. It is entirely run by volunteers, so that I wonder about the burden on the volunteers in that manner, and if there's ways to bring in other types of sponsorships or funding. I think that is it.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, Melinda. This is a strong application. I think very clear with the intersectionality on the front, the fact that they are thinking about differences in Indian women in the workplace also feels really relevant to talk about. And I similarly find the issue of the volunteers, it also raised questions about like the community support, but overall I scored this application in the high end. Mm-hmm. And I guess I want to add the fact that they use, because I went to the website and all, the fact that they use methodologies that are already very diverse, such as like theater for the oppressed, or like ways to approach people to tell their stories and create safer spaces for them, especially women. I think it's also it was relevant for me to see that work happening.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any additional comments on this applicant?
I wanted to add, I skipped
Yes.
a note. I also found that they have an excellent history of like keeping track of how many people have participated in their events before, in terms of not the community audience, but the participants within the theater productions, and how many have benefit. So that I thought their history of service was really detailed and expressed, like it's expressed trust in this project.
Thanks, Melinda. Anything else? Anyone else? All right. If not, Anne Marie. Oops, I'm sorry, Siri.
No, I just remember the fact that in the leadership you can see people that are not necessarily dedicated completely to theater. And so it's exactly what they want to portray, right? So people that are in other industries and then they also want to create art. So just wanted to add that.
Okay, thank you. All right, Anne Marie.
All right. Next is Rec Spec Gallery. Jake is the primary and Harold is the secondary. Jake, whenever you're ready, you may begin, and I'll start the timer as soon as you begin speaking.
Thank you. So, Rec Spec Gallery is an art gallery that is seeking to create further art shows made by a wider body of other artists. They are ultimately curators and facilitators. They're looking to create events as well as potentially a new physical location to house the many art shows and artist fairs that they put on. They seem to have been facing difficulty during the pandemic, but ultimately before and throughout have a history of serving women, people of color, and also the LGBTQIA+ community. Within my notes, I scored this highly. This seems to be the kind of material that aligns with not only our mission, but the structure seems to be really prioritizing creating opportunities for a wider community of artists. They seem to have a very responsible track record of being a genuine cultural hub and curating and spotlighting or highlighting other kinds of artists around various themes, which seem to be very impressive. Those communities they serve, there are a lot of them, but there are many different programs that they offer, which I think is representative of some pretty robust programming. I think that they demonstrated resiliency during the pandemic and created other opportunities, particularly during tough times, for other people. So really continuing their mission that they say that they're doing. Language accessibility is a part of the curatorial vision. I definitely had some questions about what that is, particularly because things seem to differ from show to show. And I believe that their structure of the programs that they are proposing really do match what they say that they do and have done. So I do think that it seems to be genuinely offering opportunities to a wide swath of people in this community.
And Harold, you're up whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I had some issues with this application. Actually, I didn't feel that they articulated really the intersection of getting their mission out with their programming and actually who their constituent cultural community was. I didn't think that was clear enough. It might be part of grantsmanship, but I didn't feel that they made a convincing case that was compelling enough for me on those issues. I also didn't think that their service history was articulated clearly enough. It seemed to be overgeneral in how they wrote about it. I didn't feel like in the narrative that they addressed what they were going to do about tourism. Didn't think that they mentioned that mostly it was local artists. They didn't articulate a clear methodology of how they were going to do their marketing to also try to address the issue of tourism. I just felt that in several of the instances that the responses were not specific enough for me.
Harold, this is Patricia. And so I just wanted to be clear because I know, everyone doesn't have the same level of quote grantsmanship ability, but what I heard clearly from you is there's a lack of detail in some of the answers and in some of the things that you were looking for that would have explained what the goals and how they were going to achieve them in greater depth. Is that correctly worded?
That is accurate. And one of the general comments that I made about the application is that I also think that perhaps this organization might be a good example of how this year the city involving unaffiliated, unincorporated groups and for-profit groups, it might be an indication of how some of those goals don't mesh for people that are not really doing community serving nonprofit work. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. Harold, were you done? I didn't want to interrupt.
Yes, I'm done.
Okay.
So,
Any additional comments or thoughts?
I would like to make one comment.
Yes, Jake.
Thank you. First off, Harold, cool to know you, and happy to be primary and secondary. Something that is related to this, but this I put down in my notes for this was, it is interesting to note because certain projects serve very specific communities, is it about each project serving as many people as possible, or developing a program or portfolio of different groups that serve different communities? This is something that this application brought up for me as a question.
Thank you, Jake. Any additional comments?
yes, I guess so. I think the issue of addressing cultural communities that are at risk of underrepresentation and erasure and visibility in the city, for me, the way that I read the guidelines, for me, that has a high-ranking priority. And with this application, I would have liked to have seen more specifics on, this is who we are trying to make sure that they are represented more specifically.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarity. All right, Anne Marie.
Okay, next application up for review is Gorilla Reel Multimedia. Siri is the primary and Jake is the secondary. Siri, whenever you're ready, you may begin. I'll start timing once you've been speaking.
Yes, so the project, it's called the Revamp Series, and it bridges live performance and short films, providing a dynamic platform, merging arts form, inspiring diverse audiences. That's what they say in their mission. It's self-produced, and it has been hosted in different venues well known in the city. I think for this application, I had the question of how general it was. It seems to be serving all communities and inviting all artists, or I didn't find any specificity, which made it difficult to figure what are their key constituencies, who are the communities they're serving, how the communities are having a voice and the creative direction. So I think the proposal could gain if more specificity is added to it, because it was hard for me to envision their communities really.
Okay, maybe I'll say like over when I'm done. So yes, thank you. In my notes, I found this to be structurally somewhat problematic in terms of the way that this program is organized. I think it definitely seems cool and popular, but to a certain end, it ultimately is held within a private business, is some of the proposals, and there is a limited capacity based on the venue to what that is. So right off the bat, that would be difficult to pinpoint an extremely broad cultural standpoint, an audience that even could be invited to each event. And if we're trying to prioritize certain venues or cultural venues of one kind. I don't know if necessarily going to something that is a successful private business and will benefit them in that capacity is within the mandate of this grant. It does seem that they're held in very high regard by the community. And it does seem like, again, in their structure, they're an organization that creates exposure and opportunities for their participants, which certainly is cool. But it doesn't seem like language accessibility is really a main focus. And it doesn't seem like the programmatic reach is necessarily toward a cultural end, but really more a fan end or a fan base culture. So I believe it to be limited in its mission. Over.
Thank you. Any additional comments on this applicant?
I think to pinpoint from that, I don't see how equity is part of the proposal, or if it's going to have a impact in communities at risk, basically.
Thank you. All right. If there's no one else, Anne Marie.
Okay, we'll move on to the next application. Let me reset the timer. All right, up next is Wapango Sin Fronteras. Melinda is the primary and Jake is the secondary. Melinda, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Okay, thank you. So this is for the 11th annual Wapango Sin Fronteras Festival, a grassroots celebration of Mexican vernacular music traditions in Austin, Texas. The constituencies were clearly defined in the mission statement. The constituencies are Mexican Americans mainly. Excellent description of the mission as well, and the artistic vision. And part of it is that I think they've been running for over 10 years. And so they sort of have a clear vision of their project. The festival has festival originated in 2014, bringing in musicians from Austin and other parts, again, musicians also from Mexico and other parts of the U.S. The leadership also seems appropriate. The person in charge is an expert in music, a musician himself, and part of the Austin community for 30 years. The festival's already popular among Mexican Americans, and it incorporates both dance, like the particular dance of Wapangos, and and as well as musical performances. So it's about the musicians playing the Wapango music as well as particular dance related to that type of music. So I find the project itself perfect for the Austin community. The intersection is, there was a little bit missing there. It's community led, and the response there for the intersectionality was that it's community led. So that's how they cover intersectionality, and that didn't seem like enough. In Mexican American music, does tend to be highly male, led, and so there wasn't a conversation about how that might be addressed. Not clear on accessibility either, whether it was just the ADA policies or if it was going to go beyond that. So there was a little bit of concern there. And then my only other concern is in respect with bringing in performers from other places. That's okay, I think, of course, right? Especially they're bringing performers from Mexico, but I wonder what the kind of ratio is to performers from Austin, from the community here versus from other places.
Great, thank you. Any additional comments?
I just want to say I found that, I think that the strongest evidence to the success of this event is definitely its track record. It seems to have a lot of its character figured out and has met with success in a lot of those things. I think the level of organization is impressive. I do have just general questions about, is this something, again, back to that kind of question that for me goes through all of these applications, is this really excellent for its specific base and in a wider view makes up for a really broad portfolio, and therefore it's great to be as specific as it is, or is it incumbent upon this event to broaden itself and welcome more people in? And I think that that is a question they seem to be wrestling with, but yes, that is ongoing, and this application raised that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, if not, Anne Marie.
Okay, we're moving on to Ventana Ballet. Harold, you will be the primary on this one. And Siri is going to be the secondary.
Give
And
me
Harold,
just a second to
yeah.
change my screen again. I've got so many tabs open right now.
That's all right. Take your time. Whenever you're ready, you may begin, and I'll wait to start the timer until you begin speaking. So take all the time you need.
Okay, this application is for a Ventana Ballet project called Kiva. This is one of the applications that I felt, I think I scored it well, but it's one of the applications where right up front, I would still like to see more specificity in their target constituency. It was, and I feel that way because in more than one of the responses, they simply quote the language of the guidelines. And as an example, blah, 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 that directly serve communities at risk or displacement and are experiencing institutional marginalization. That's the mission of the Elevate program. But in the narrative responses, I would like to see more detail on actually how the organization is going to go about doing that, and for them to identify that. And more than once in the application, my notes say would like to see more specific language. I felt like the part of the narrative was aspirational, appropriately so, and that they have made note that they are already making, but they are being more specific about making progress at addressing equity issues. In terms of support, in most of these applications, I thought that I had issues with the scoring system on the budget section because it's either a 5 or a 1. And with some of these, and this is one of them, I thought that there might be more appropriate to have a middle score there. One of the things that I question about this application is that they have a history of running really healthy surpluses. But I would have liked to have seen them also anticipate some additional earned and unearned income to go with some of the cash outlay that they were going to do. And I found that for those of us out here in the nonprofit world, we should request funding, absolutely, but we should also try to project other places where that funding is coming from and specify those line items where you're going to put some of your own cash into your project. So that was one of the major issues that I had with the application in terms of its fiscal health. Because they didn't show that they were reinvesting for this funding program, although they have a history of running healthy surpluses in their budget sheet. I still generally scored this as a good application, but those are my areas of concern.
And before the secondary goes, because it may impact, I have a question for Anne Marie. Is it reinvesting in the program? Is there some piece of that that's part of it's a part of requirement, or is it just an optional?
In terms of the budget, this particular budget does not require that they have matching dollars. So that is why there's no longer a requirement to show that other sources of income and other sources of funds are included in the budget. I think that's good feedback for an applicant to know that it's important, may be important to a panelist to show additional investment. It can also speak to the community reach question, or the opportunity creation, in that if the community is investing monetarily in the work that they're doing and it's reflected in the budget, that's can be a component of scoring there. But again, it's not something that we required in the application, that they show that they have other sources of income. It can just show the request amount and how that's going to be allocated.
Right. No, thank you. And I just say that because I think it came up once before, where it's an old requirement. There was some level of that, but that's not applicable here. Did I state that correctly? Okay. All right.
Right.
But yes. So thank you, Harold. I just wanted to lay out something that was implied that you might not have realized that. So.
And
Okay.
I understood that there was not a match requirement.
Yeah, no, it's the piece that in previous pieces someone might think, oh, well, gosh, and it doesn't apply here. So, okay,
right.
I'm so sorry. I jumped in.
That's okay. I have one other clarifying thing. Harold, you mentioned that there the scoring for the budget is either 1 or 5. It's the scoring rubric for the budget is 1, 3, 4,
oh no, actually,
or 5.
Now I'm looking down at my sheet.
Yeah.
I just made a note that I had issues with the budget.
Got it. Okay.
And I don't remember how I scored it. I can zip over there real quick.
Okay.
Oh, I'm not supposed to say what I scored though.
That's right. It's a secret until later, until the award announcements go out.
It's all good. All right. Thank you. I'm sorry. I don't remember who's secondary, but please jump in.
I'm jumping in. Very similarly to Harold, I see this application mentioning the disadvantage or things like that without specificity, but different from Harold, that made me score the proposal in the lower end, just because I went through all the documentation and their work is truly beautiful. But I do think that it's in terms of serving communities that are at risk or that are underserved, it's more aspirational. I couldn't see how the documentation supports that mission. And I do think that at some points, I wonder if there was certain risk of tokenism or even some charity mindset in the phrasing of the proposal. So that was a point of concern, and that's why some of the scores went lower in my end. And let me see if there is anything else. So yeah, basically, if equity really has benefits in this case, I wasn't sure how to determine that with the documentation provided. Yeah, so those were my notes.
Thank you. Any additional comments on this applicant? Okay, if not, Anne Marie.
Okay. The next application up for review is Ariel Jackson. Harold is the primary and Melinda will be the secondary. And Harold, whenever you're ready to begin, once you begin speaking, I'll start the timer.
Okay. project name is Cage Match Project. They are requesting $25,000. One of the things that I liked about their proposal was a level of specificity, there's that word again, that they included about who their target audience, their key constituencies were, and to address some of what Jake is mentioning. They, for this application, for this project, they're really, really specific about who their constituency is. But I do feel like part of the strength of their application is that they are providing opportunity to this fairly broad, actually, constituent audience, but showcasing it for the community as a whole. So I didn't feel like it was terribly exclusive. The other thing that I liked about this application is that they were really specific about professional development, doing workshops, and in addition to the live in-person programming, they're also doing mixed in podcasts.
Mhm.
I thought it was a strong application, just in general. Color composition, which used Austin's 1920s and 30s redlining maps as source material, is one of the things they say about where the motivation comes from. For the work that I'm involved in, and perhaps it's a bias, part of what is important, I think, about the Elevate program is seeing evidence that people understand the cultural history of Austin and trying to do programming that addresses that, specifically with a focus on Black and Brown folks in East Austin. But the reach of their programming is not targeted just on Black and Brown folks. It's mostly a queer community. I like to see that kind of intersectionality. Ultimately, I thought that this was an excellent proposal. Excellent programming, well written, directly address the elements of Elevate, clear mission and practice, and history that meets the mission and serves the community. I thought it was one of the best proposals.
I'll just add that they also had a contingency plan or came up with one during COVID-19. So they show resiliency, and they're on. They've got. They were able to keep going through that. Yes, the key constituencies, I agree, were clearly defined. And I do love the component of the podcast. Again, I think that does come about during COVID-19, and it's part of the programming moving forward. And it's also part of how they capture the community voice in the process as they continue to work towards the next steps. So I also did rate it quite high.
And another of the things that I appreciate about integrating digital media and the internet is that is also a marketing mechanism that people around the world are exposed to. And that's one way to get our reach out to a broader community of potential tourists to come here to see the live programming that they've been exposed to through marketing on the internet.
Thank you. Any additional comments on this applicant?
Yeah, I wanted to add, this was one of my highest scores. I think it's a brilliant application. Really, you can see the relevance of the project, and especially I was taken by how much their work will impact artists in long term, because they're working on their helping with the materials to like promote themselves as artists, like all the ways taking care of themselves, other ways that are sustainable for artists. So I can see how this could have like a truly deep impact in not just one event, but like for longer.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, Anne Marie.
Okay, this brings us to our first break of the day. We will be back right at 11. All right, the next application up for review is the Electric Church. Melinda will be the primary and Siri will be the secondary. Let me get my timer up and running. Okay, and Melinda, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Okay, this is the Electric Church, and they're requesting 25,000. The project summary is immersive experiences, captivating live events, and state-of-the-art recording sessions foster the growth of emerging talents. And they want to expand that project. And the support would be used to host 4 inspiring live events, highlighting local bands and artists, and providing a platform for underrepresented artists. So this one is a music proposal, and the work that's already been done with this group is live music. They started off as a live music production house in 2014 and have kind of kept steadily growing their project, moving to adding recording, studio recording, and networking for their artists. It has a great representative leadership, the members of the leadership board, and I love that they provide recording sessions. That's really important for artists. It's difficult to finance that, so that's an excellent opportunity to provide the artists. The one big issue here is that it doesn't focus on or it doesn't tell us who the underserved key constituencies are. So we have just a vague term of addressing the needs of underserviced art, culture, and musicians. So there's not enough about who their key constituencies are and how this project serves those groups.
Melinda, you just said everything I was gonna say. I agree with all of that. The lack of specificity was my biggest concern. And I'm with you, like totally agree.
Thank you. Any additional comments on this applicant? If not, Anne Marie.
Okay. We will move on to the next application. It will be Nook Turner. Jake is their primary. And Harold has a conflict, so he will be turning off his camera and muting himself. Harold will invite you back once we're done reviewing this application. And then I believe I didn't have a secondary written down, so if Melinda or Siri, if you'll be happy to jump in as a secondary, would love to hear your thoughts and comments. Jake, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Thank you. So the Nook Turner Festival is a music and entertainment festival, and described also as something of a conference within the city of Austin. My reading of this, I will say, may be disadvantaged from not knowing the artist. That being said, of course, that would be a conflict of interest, but essentially, my reading of this event is that it is, so named for an individual artist and very much centered around an individual artist. That being said, we do know that in a broader context, Willie Nelson is a great example, right? Certain levels of important artistry can really forward a community and become representative through their artistic output and creating a point of community. So in my reading of this, really just from the application, to me, it was kind of a toss-up. Further research required. The festival itself does seem to potentially create opportunities, self-described. Our key constituencies are Black and Brown creatives, including artists, bloggers, influencers, and industry professionals. That does sound, very much within the scope of the mandate of this grant. Looking to showcase their artistry and contribute to the cultural fabric of the city. That being said, of course, the festival is named and very much highlighting a certain individual who it's so named after. So there are other examples really essentially like that, though they do name other artists that are involved. So there is another reference to other wider community members, most of which are East Austinites. So that is essentially the dilemma, I present without further detail. I think it could kind of go both ways based on this application. Maybe the best way to describe it would be, I think further specificity would be certainly required to demonstrate if this is a charismatic individual who is bringing together members of the community. I would want more details on how that is actually achieved with this event. Over.
Excuse me. Additional comments on this applicant?
Yeah, I had the same dilemma that Jake, but did the research. I do believe that when it is about an individual, it really makes a difference if the person is bringing an inclusive space to folks that haven't had that stage before. So with the research I did, I could see how the Nook will bring or create a safer, more inclusive space for other artists. And so it is relevant, as I read it, to have like a center in in one person if that person is bringing all this community with them, right? So in the end, this application scored high in my mostly because I can see how the renowned rap artist is influencing the community, right? Bringing together, local and national artists. And so, but I appreciate, Jake, that you mentioned that. And then perhaps for future reference, to like write it in a way that is clearer could be useful.
I would actually like to say I completely agree, and I think I left that out of my commentary. I think there's a lot of hyperbole in this application, and I would invite this application to be resubmitted without so much of that boastful language and a greater focus on what is actually being accomplished. And it might be perfectly clear, in which case very easy to award and understand what they're doing. But the self-description might actually kind of get in the way of what could potentially be achieved.
All right. There are no additional comments. Anne-Marie?
Okay, on to the next application. It will be Jasmine Patel. Jake will be primary and Melinda secondary. Harold, you are welcome to join us again for this application. And Jake, if you'll wait until Harold comes back on, then you can get going.
Okay, my notes, half of my notes are out, so I'll have to bring the other half. But now, just actually a point of clarification. You said Jasmine Patel. The application I have in front of me was submitted by Jasmine Patel, but the business organization is Kush ATX, correct? That's excellent. Okay, so Kush ATX is a queer South Asian cultural arts organization. It says that it creates spaces for community and expression for effectively everyone on a great spectrum. I'll say it, LGBTQIA2S, meaning two-spirit plus. But with a specific focus also on South Asians. So I think that is something that is worth pointing out and something interesting. They propose to create a series of programs, but also seek general institutional support for those programs. So I think there is definitely a lot of questions to be asked about where those funds are going to be put, and how that is creating opportunities for other people. Particularly within a collective or an event planning, it can often be difficult to know what actually the structure is. So I'd be curious about that. The actual activities, following with your advice, Patricia, please come back to me in 1 second while I come up with a more articulate way to put this. But my essential feedback is that I believe that the organization is designed to serve a particular community, though I don't know if the programming that they are presenting here and are applying for actually serves that community, or it's really more of a general interest activity that these people are inviting other people in within their existing community to be a part of. So that definitely is a question for me. Who is this ultimately for, and who is being invited to this program, and then for what ends is the program actually being created? Over.
Thank you. All right, so yes, definitely have some questions myself about the structure or like kind of framework of what the opportunities being created are. There's not a lot of detail there. But I do find the cultural activities, I guess, that you pointed out at that last comment you made. I guess I was reading it as just the activities proposed are targeting, let me see if I remember. Yeah, they're targeting they're kind of a little bit all over the place. They are targeting, but they are targeting queer folk, right? So that's part of the big emphasis there. So I thought that this one hit the nail on the head with intersectionality, just as you spoke earlier in terms of the culture, but also this emphasis on the LGBTQ plus community. So I gave it high points in terms of that. And the history of service also was very detailed. And I love that they worked throughout the year with minor festivities or small events throughout the year. And then my only concern was aside from the opportunity creation, the formal, the language access, I wish it was more formalized. So there's this idea that the people will find each other, or there will be somebody who speaks the language of that other person because we're made up of a big diverse group, but there doesn't seem to be something formalized in terms of language access. And then my other note here is I did also love that the way that there's like this big umbrella unifier, which is that they're immigrants. So the constituencies and the participants are immigrants.
Okay. Any additional comments, clarifications?
Yeah, I wanted to add, I agree with you all. I really appreciate the effort that they're doing with intersectionality. It seems like a needed, space for the community. So that was nice. I do agree with the language. It would be great if they do more purposely an effort to have it like a standard service or something, rather than like relying on like here and there people that could translate. And the other comment I wanted to add is that within the creative leadership, I want to offer the possibility to increase their diversity within the LGBTQ community, right? And so for future references.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, Anne-Marie.
Okay, the next application is Entumbre Intermediate Events and Installations. Siri is the primary and Jake is the secondary. Siri, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Let me. Okay. Sorry, a little bit of technical. Okay. So this project is presenting the Interference Fest, which is a 3-day festival featuring women and non-binary artists of color from different media and practices, which include writing, music, poetry, but also mind-body awareness practitioners. And they mention besides the women and non-binary folks as key constituencies, also people with PTSD, including veterans, and people with physical or mental disabilities. I appreciate in this project the fact that they're addressing the difficulty that a lot of people had within the pandemic to re-enter society in a way. I know we're still in the pandemic, but they're specifically trying to serve that need of like, socializing again. And I appreciate that, and how they are presenting some opportunities for artists and people to kind of like enter into that space of somehow healing. So that was that I found that interesting. I think one of the questions I had is that within the cultural leadership, so again, we have this one person situation again, and I see that they want to include more if they are granted the funds here. And the person mentioned that they want to include in the creative leadership different professions outside of the arts. And they say that this could help to have different perspectives, which I understand. But that also means that the creative leadership, not all people have lived experience or necessarily the cultural knowledge related to the people that they're serving or the artists that they're working with. So it became for me like a question of how much that would be actually serving the purpose that they want to serve. Yeah, those are for now.
I indeed echo your sentiments, and I think that the root of some of my problems with this application truly came from the way that it was written. Many of the answers to the questions seem very subjective and pronounced, and they'd say, "I have decided this," or "I have this identity, and therefore it fits in." It seemed very singular to the applicant. Some of the answers to these questions, not necessarily descriptions of how that programming connects to the mission and ultimately connects to the funding being provided here. There were a lot of things that were named as particular causes, but those seem to be, to a certain extent, inconsistent from year to year or to the general mission of these programs. So I think that I felt a little bit, it seemed to me a little bit unfocused for me to encapsulate exactly if this is going to be fulfilling kind of the needs of the audiences that we have been talking about. And finally, it ultimately, to me, did not seem that this speaks to some of the unique needs or cultures of Austin as a specific place. It did seem to me quite general. And so for those reasons, I have some questions and would request some clarity for sure.
A point of clarification before I ask for additional comments. So Jake, because I always have to pop in when I hear the grantsmanship type, but I want to make sure I clarify what I heard also following, which is that not limited to someone's ability to be able to complete the grant, but actually within the answers that were provided, you did not get the information that you were looking for or that you needed. It was not a matter of how it was written, but just it wasn't there. Did I hear that correctly?
Correct. The information presented, yes, did not satisfy that answer.
Thank you. All right, additional comments.
I just wanted to reiterate that I have a note on my comments that while we had the people who were the executive, or well, my comment says good executive and creative leader, but why? In what way? So there was some missing information there, like just naming the identity wasn't enough to say why that leader is a strong leader or an appropriate leader. And then also I had, in terms of history of service, the founding principles were not clear.
Thank you. Any additional comments? If not, Anne Marie.
Thanks. And just one quick point of clarification, because I think I've heard this mentioned over some of the reviews, that many of these applications, though we're sort of primarily reviewing in this panel day of individuals and creative businesses, state of Texas nonprofits, which are nonprofit organizations that are registered within the state of Texas, but not IRS 501c designated nonprofits. There are also creative or unincorporated groups or groups that do not have like a formal business entity. So many of them are collectives or individual artists. And so it's totally fine for an applicant to be the sole creator and sole performer, sole producer, sole artist in these applications. So I just wanted to make sure that that's clear since that's been brought up a couple times. You can continue to bring that up as an individual. I'd like to see more information about you if you're the one and only. But I just want to make that clear on the attendee side that is not individuals are not ineligible, or it's not a scoring metric that you have more than one person necessarily on serving in a leadership role within a proposal. Okay, the next application.
Can I add a comment?
Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely we have plenty of those projects where it's just one person. And I think, for example, we just scored CAT is an example of that. And we could see how the fact that there is one individual doesn't mean anything. It depends on how they express their connection with the community and all of that. And we have these cases, right, where CAT was like, in my end, very, very high scored, even though it's just one person. So.
Okay, thank you. Next up for review is Babe ATX. Harold is the primary and Melinda is the secondary. Harold, let me reset the timer. Whenever you're ready, you may begin and I'll start timing when you start speaking.
Okay. Babe ATX is the name of the project. They are requesting $25,000. They are described as a DJ collective that champions gender equity in the Austin scene. They are specifically seeking support for a DJ festival that will be called Babe Stock. The general comment that I had up front with this application was that they seem to present good ideas and a mission of what they want to do, but there seems to be a lack of experience in going for outside funding sources. They don't have a long history of expertise actually doing these things. Those are the primary kinds of questions that I had with the application. Their target constituency is very clear. They make a point of saying non-binary individuals and stating the case that in terms of the local scene, programming that is focused on non-binary folks and the DJ and electronic music scene is lacking, and they want to address that in their programming and putting together this festival that they would like to be an annual festival. I think part of my critique, or negative critique of the proposal, is just that I felt like it didn't show enough experience in planning and budgeting for what they are proposing. And as someone who rides deadlines all the time, what I also know is that with an online deadline, a lot of times proposals, you don't have a chance to flesh out those last things at the bottom of the application, and sometimes you just have to press send. And I think that might have been the case at the end of this application. I don't know that.
Thank you. So my, yeah, I thought the key constituencies were clearly defined and match our mission. I would wonder about a wider reach in terms of inclusivity and intersectionality. They do acknowledge or say that they are planning to have or that they worked on having more BIPOC artists, and so the last lineup was 50% plus BIPOC artists. So that was kind of a plus there. And then in terms of the budget, I agree, looking at what they expect to pay for with the budget, in terms of equipment and lights and all the good stuff that a music show takes, and also promotion and visual installations. And so that might, yeah, so maybe budgeting is, yeah, where it loses a little bit of points for me.
Thank you. Any additional comments on this applicant? If not, Anne Marie.
Okay. The next application up for review is CAT. Siri will be primary and Jake will be secondary. Siri, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Yes, so this is Superwoman Records that started as a passion project. And this is one case that I was mentioning that it's around one artist, but this is actually the highest of my scores here, because I can see how the project is serving Black women artists in Austin in a way that really creates space for them to thrive as artists. It's really balancing the lack of diversity, taking it in their own hands, offering all these opportunities for Black women to actually make it into the music scene. I was very, this project made me passionate when I was reading it. I was impressed by all the ideas, all the way it's written down. And I just feel like it really offers long-lasting opportunities, and it could change the cultural landscape in some way, you know. So I can see the impact is really high as I read it. So yeah, those are my comments for now.
I believe, yes, I think thematically it is exceptional. I do believe that it is quite specific in its focus, and the specificity of its focus seems like it's something that is needed and can be effective. However, I would be remiss if I did not say, from just purely the application alone, there was a certain level of organization in programs that I think could be stronger, for sure, to inspire confidence. I think that it is, the word opportunity is used and the ideas presented. And so I think that those seem to be very strong and very accurate. At the same time, when looking at really specifically what those opportunities are and what the benefit is, I was definitely left with some questions. So that is my reading of that application.
Thank you. Any additional comments on this applicant?
I agree with both sides to some extent. Being very familiar with the music scene here in Austin is part of what I do. I actually can tell you that I feel like, at least, there is a need in the community for a project like this. And it's kind of, it seems like this one woman, you know, is taking on the world. But I think that shows that level of cultural leadership that we are looking for, and the programming that she envisions is very broad and ambitious. But this is one of my better scored applications, actually. I thought it was a good project to propose. for this funding program, for not for all funding programs, but the guidelines and the mission of Elevate, I think that the application hits those spots.
Oh, you're muted.
I know it does not like me. All right. Thank you, Harold. Any additional comments? All right. If not, Emery.
Okay. Well, this brings us to our lunch break. So we've published that we will start the afternoon session at 1 o'clock. So we will be on break until then. We'll see you all back. Maybe if you can all return maybe like 5 minutes before, and then that way if you'll have any questions or concerns about the last batch of applicants, if something comes to mind, we'll have an opportunity to chat about it then. Okay, see you all at 1. Austin, thank you. So the very first application we're going to review after lunch for the individual creative business panel 3 is Austin Belly Dance Convention. Harold is the primary and Jake is the secondary. But before we get started, I just want to make sure that Jake, you're all good to go. You're all set. Looks like your connection is a little slow. We lost you there. Let's see. No, he was having some connection issues earlier. Is anyone else able to hear him? I'm not able to hear him.
Okay.
Jesus, if you want to pause the recording. Okay, so Austin Belly Dance Convention. Harold will be the primary, Jake will be the secondary. Let's see, timer is up and running. Harold, whenever you're ready to begin, you may do so.
Okay. This application is from the Austin Belly Dance Convention. They're requesting $25,000 to go to their 2024 convention, which is a 3-day event that brings dancers and audiences from Austin and from outside of Austin for a convention that includes professional networking and workshops, free performances to the public as well, professional teachers. In my reading of this application, the focus is on the Middle Eastern belly dance tradition. The organization has a long history. They did a good job of documenting how they came to be, and a progression going forward from that founding over 20 years ago. I thought that this application hit all of the points in terms of identifying their constituency, doing really good outreach locally and outside of Austin. And though the overarching genre of dance is specific, the audiences that they hit, it's very, very broad, bringing all of those folks together around this form of dance. Their leadership is right on point. They make a good case for addressing equity issues and intersectionality of their participants and their audience. The budget was tight, makes a lot of sense to me. They do a good job of showing community support and investment in terms of volunteers and such, but they also stress that their funding stream is not only dependent on this application. I think I would probably classify this group as one of Austin's legacy dance organizations. And I think that they're very deserving of support through this program.
I would largely agree. I found this to be exemplary in the cultural leadership arena. It did seem like it is a really interesting and bold opportunity to both serve an existing organization that has been very responsive to Austin by potentially bringing in different traditions to Austin and enriching the cultural fabric there. So I think it balances both of those audiences very well. And also, I think that, again, the track record is a really strong point here. They've definitely exemplified instances of being able to really do what they say. And then finally, something that I like to see is resilience during the pandemic. They were faced with even more hardships and continue to go through. And it does look like this is a very resilient and responsive organization.
Thank you all. Any additional comments on this applicant? If not, Anne-Marie.
The next application for review is Serum, but Melinda is the primary and Jake is the secondary. Melinda, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Okay. Serum presents a series of 3 workshops open to the public in Austin, focusing on Indigenous promoters from Mexico who will share their heritage and connect with prevalent Hispanic heritage culture in Austin. And the workshops serve as a cultural exchange platform. So one of the best aspects of this application, I thought, is it's one of the few that focuses on Indigenous communities. So that stood out. Of course, it explains its relationship to not just Indigenous communities, but also Hispanic, Latino culture, Mexican American community in Austin. And then another thing that really stood out on this one was that part of the budget would go towards scholarships or subsidies for participation in these workshops. It does have a kind of one thing that I found missing is that it indicates where the Indigenous communities are tied to in cities or states in Mexico, but it does not name those Indigenous communities. So I'm a little worried about, who are the Indigenous communities, who are the participants, and does this group know that well? So I'm a little worried about that because there were no mentions of actual identifying the Indigenous communities. Other than that, yeah, I think that's what I have for this one.
Yes, I largely agree. I think that this is a really interesting example of balancing specificity, but there are certain points where I found that I wanted a lot more specificity. I think the attention to the cultures included definitely gives an impression of knowledge on behalf of the organizers, but I was left a little bit unclear what the workshops would actually consist of. And so I read something that says, we propose 3 workshops showcasing Indigenous knowledge. That I really am not quite sure what that is in reference to the workshop and how it connects to the Austin community. And I think that is a big opportunity to thread the needle on what actually the knowledge is. Is it for Austin? And then that may or may not indicate or answer some of those questions you were talking about, right? Of who is it being represented here?
Yes, and I wanted to add, you're right. I also had a note of what's the content of the workshop. So we don't have a lot of details about what's going to happen in these workshops. We actually have very few details.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
This is
yeah.
oh, pardon me, go ahead.
Thank you, Harold. Yes, I have this application with a note that the required documentation is not completed. So from the 2 letters of recommendation that are repeated twice, the website is down, and they don't have a history of work that showcases that at least they have been working for a year with the communities, because the work samples that they send is for the future, for 2024. And so aligned with Melinda's comments, I worry about potentially cultural appropriation, just because it's not clear that there is deep knowledge of the indigenous communities that are getting involved here, or how much they have a voice on the creative leadership. Of course, the lack of documentation made lower the scores in all related to community and community engagement, community support. And so I also want to point out that for future grants, it's unclear to me why having all these like absences in the documentation, the application is still eligible. And then this is just for the future, because it confused me as to why. Mm-hmm.
Siri, 1 second, Harold, before you join us. So I just wanted to make one quick point of clarification that you're making about, because you used the term cultural appropriation, but I think what I heard was there's concern because there's no specificity on working with this population, that then, there could be that presumption that would be the case. Is that accurate? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Harold.
Oh, I think now that Siri has spoken, we're voicing many of the same concerns. I felt that the application posed good ideas, but I don't know who those indigenous communities are. And this is one of the ones that I marked that I would probably have to go back and rescore, because I wanted to hear what some of the other folks had to say, because I had a level of discomfort with the application. I thought that it just might be my ignorance, but I'll still go back and look at it, but I have the same concerns with the application of the voice.
Thank you, everyone. Anne Marie.
Yeah, I just want to, as a point of clarification, based on Siri's comment about the concern about there not being documentation, we do allow applications to continue on through the process, even if they are missing some of the required materials. So we'll take your comment under advisement, Siri, for future applications. So I just wanted to mention that, as it is not a eligibility requirement to have all of the materials attached to the application, though they are required documents as part of the application. If there aren't any more comments, we will go on to the next one. Up next is Alante Flamenco Dance Ensemble. Jake is the primary and Melinda will be the secondary. Let me reset the timer. And Jake, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Thank you. So this, if you will allow me to reach the proper place in my notes. Thank you very much. This organization is proposing to present works in progress of a finalized dance piece in the flamenco tradition They are planning to give away or to perform these dances or in progress workshops for free at the Zilker Hillside Theater. They propose a combination of performances as well as community workshops, so teaching skills to potential dancers. I found this to be having a fairly exemplary track record. They have definitely been at work doing this kind of work and serving the community in Austin. I do wonder with many other similar applications if this is not serving a need beyond the particular art form, insofar as it may have a narrow focus, or that may be something that is really important to the audience at large, and having this specificity in its art form. I think that that is something certainly to consider. I also think that it is worthy to note that this is a skill-based company. So in considering providing access and opportunities, I think it is worthwhile to note, that there is a certain level of opportunity for the artists, as well as a certain level of opportunity for audiences. And I wonder if those accessibilities are matched in this creation of this program. And finally, after looking at previous budgets, I certainly have some questions about the level of organization in being able to put on these performances. While I know that they are given away for free, I am curious what this money is necessarily going towards, particularly people that are existent within the company. Over.
Okay, thank you, Jake. Okay, so I have two main things to say about this application. I thought the programming seems rich and there was enough details to give me an idea of the different things going on and how they might enrich the cultural and artistic activity of the community. The key constituents were identified clearly, and that was also a plus. My what's the word? My minus here were maybe, I'm not sure if it should be a minus or not. I went back and forth. It's that the art form seems to actually not, it's one that's already very well known, and so it didn't seem to be something that was giving voice or giving a space to a type of art form that is less known and that is in fact in danger of being erased. And so that was my main issue with this application.
Thank you. Any additional comments here?
Yes, I also keep going back and forth about the flamenco part, and I think if anything I can add to this comment is that even though the flamenco as a form is widely spread and coming from Spain, it's interesting that they are adding the Latinx Hispanic approach to it, kind of taking the form and make it their own, or somehow shifting it to be from, you'll say, the territories that were colonized by Spain. So I think that's interesting, and I keep thinking about that possibility.
Any additional comments? If not, Anne-Marie.
Okay, I'm just going to give one point of clarification here. It isn't necessarily the art form that someone is presenting in their application that is from a culture or community group that is at risk of cultural displacement and erasure. It's the programmatic focus of the Elevate grant is more about the key constituencies that are being served. It's a less of a consideration of the art form that's being presented, because that we could have filmmakers who are making films. We could have contemporary music makers in this program. It's totally fine that an art form that's being presented isn't itself at risk of cultural erasure and displacement. And then the other thing I want to bring up is that Austin is filled with all kinds of different artists and makers and producers. And so if we do end up having several flamenco applications or several dance companies that are presenting, or any other art form, multiple versions of different types of artwork, that's totally fine. We're happy to fund a variety of similar artistic presentations. So just want to make that clear, that that's not a restriction in the granting process. Let's go ahead and go on to the next application. Luis Ordaz Gutierrez, and Harold will be the primary and Siri will be the secondary. And Harold, if you'll give me 1 moment to reset the timer, I will start it whenever you begin speaking.
Okay, this application is for the 7th annual Fandango de los Muertos festival, which is a site-specific Day of the Dead celebration held in central East Austin in a cemetery. I like this application. I like this project. The constituency is very well articulated. The tradition, the cultural tradition is rich. And again, they are not the only people who will be doing programming around that date. But one of the things that I think is important is that these expressions come from a multiplicity of places rather than just, quote, the majors. In terms of cultural leadership and representation, community voice, and all of that, one of the things that really stands out to me is the organizational team that they put together to produce the celebration, that includes a community-based organization, the cemetery organization, includes the History Center, helping them with cultural history research. In most of, I'm going to scroll real quick here. Yeah, I thought it was a strong application, just in terms of hitting the points that are in the guidelines for the Elevate program. And I don't have a lot of complaints. It's not a perfect application, but I really like the programming and the reach that they have into the community, and it's very egalitarian in terms of who they plan to get to out to the programming. I guess one of the issues is that although it's very localized, again, this is bid tax money, so I pay attention to the sections that have to do with tourism and what are you doing to market what you're doing outside of the area. So I think that's strong.
Yes, I agree with you, Harold. I like this proposal a lot. I think it's doing something that some others may not be doing, which is sort of like counter or opposed to a lot of commodification that has gone about the Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos. I think that the purpose of reclaiming that as an indigenous practice and like the roots of it, in bringing it to a cemetery, it's just very intentional, and it really, I feel like it's something needed given how much it has spread the iconography, but not the deep meaning of the historic event. So I appreciate that a lot. I also think it's really interesting that they're pairing with the Austin History Center and like all these like different pieces that are coming together to create the event. I'm really, yeah, I liked it a lot. And I don't have much to say either on like things to improve. Just like one suggestion, and it's like just that, because it's called fandango, and fandango is a Spanish form of art, and I think this is trying to do very different things, and so I didn't want them to call attention on the use of fandango, that maybe they're considering like having a different name for the proposal, but it's just a comment. It doesn't do anything in terms of scoring, because I think it's very solid.
Thank you. Any additional comments on this applicant? If there are none, Anne Marie.
Okay, next is Ethan Bernick. Siri is the primary and Melinda is the secondary. Siri, whenever you are ready, you may begin.
Yes, so this is Bad Rating Records, creating a contemporary movement of punk in Austin, which is exciting to me. Speaking of art forms, something that has always been rebellious in a way, and this label does a lot of work trying to help this form of art and the artists that practice it to like continue their work, but in ways that are typical of the punk scene, such as like doing cassettes or things like that. So I feel like yeah, I just appreciate it all around the punk history that this is doing. And yeah, it has just like an underground tone that I appreciate, and I think in general my scores are good for this application, and I think it's doing something for the cultural landscape and the music scene. So yeah, those are my comments for now.
Yes, I had a similar reaction to this one. The constituencies are clear and relevant to our mission. I love that it's queer punk, basically. Yeah. Mission. Okay, so yeah, and yeah. Oh, and their history of service and how they're providing service for musicians in this particular genre. Is that was the strongest things I noted, and I don't have anything in terms of criticism.
I just saw now in my notes that there's one where they lose a little bit of points, is that they don't have language accessibility. So for the future, just to have that in consideration.
Thank you. Any additional, Harold?
Yeah, just quickly, considering that it's a recording project, I like the localized programming and throwback to cassettes and kind of the punk attitude that's contained in the way they describe the program. But with something like this, I would have liked to have seen them mention more about efforts to get the word outside of Austin to try to bring folks to Austin for their showcases. That's about it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Jake?
Yes, I'm maybe registering the minority opinion, but I feel somewhat compelled. I do think there are some interesting questions about aesthetics versus accessibility in putting resources into a medium that really is not the norm. It does require special equipment. For a certain limited group, it might be really accessible because that is what they're used to. But I do think there are some things to take into account about making this with the tools we have available today. Perhaps that's a mission of the aesthetics versus the accessibility, but my duty is to judge the accessibility. So I do wonder, is that going to have as broad a reach and impact, and therefore cultural leadership, by choosing a limited older medium technology, not medium?
Anything else? All right, Anne Marie.
Okie doke. Next up is Proyecto Teatro. Melinda will be the primary and Siri will be the secondary. Melinda, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
You're muted, Melinda.
Thank you. All right. So Proyecto Teatro is a Latinx performing arts company. And the proposal is to have arts education programs that include classes and workshops for youth and adults to explore and train in socially conscious physical theater, musical theater, dance, sewing, visual arts, and photography, stage performances, and cultural arts experiences, which are unique workshops and events that allow the general community to explore the rich gamma of Latin American culture. This was a great proposal. It was one of my higher scoring ones. I was very, the constituencies are specific to Latinx and Hispanic, Mexican American, and Chicano. And of course, this covers a lot of ground in the Austin community. I love the use of Theater of the Oppressed as part of their approach to this. The place that lost some points for me was, and I think I tried to sort of gather this from other places anyways, but the cultural leadership, there's just a list and not a discussion of how these leaders contribute to the approach, how their life experience or their roles will inform their leadership or inform their leadership. The history of service is impressive. And what else did I have here? Their understanding of intersectionality and how that will be part of their programming is also strong. I think that's what I have here.
Yes, I agree, Melinda. I was so impressed with the history of service here. And I do think that it brings a relevant sort of offering to the city and to the key constituencies. I actually don't have much to add because I agree with you mostly. Just something I forgot to mention before is that this application was not, we couldn't access it through the regular way because there was some like characters that were not able to read. And so I don't know if it was a compatibility from the applicant computer to this or what. I also think some of the answers were longer than what it's allowed, and I wonder if that was why. But and so just this is a recommendation for the applicant. The way it's written is very clear, is very compelling, but then to make sure that it's accessible, that you can read it, and then that if it is that because you're being too long, to just summarize and make it according to what it's asked in the terms of characters and stuff like that. But I do like that a lot too.
Thank you. Any additional comments? If not, Anne Marie.
Okay, next up is Xenia Rock. Siri is the primary and Harold is the secondary. Siri, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Thank you. Yes, the proposal here is to do what they call the Gypsy Art Festival, which is an immersive 3-day camping experience with an engaging artistic programs, as they put it in their application. And it's has been running for 4 years, and then the last one was 2019 due to COVID. And okay, so that's like this summary of the proposal. I think for me, it was the issue was some lack of specificity about the communities they serve, and in that same vein, how would they be accountable for these communities? Because it seems to be broadly for everyone. So I was unsure if their mission is rooted in serving communities that are at risk of cultural erasure. And they mentioned marginalized communities, but without specificity. And in terms of the history, it seems to serve broadly to all communities. So that was the kind of the questions that I had, as to think of equity and if that's going to have a benefits for the community. Yeah, that's for me. Oh, actually, I have more notes. Sorry. It's the thing that I didn't find, and then I kept going back and forward to see if I was missing something, is the an intersectional approach. I couldn't find what is their take on that. And I also found difficult to see if the communities have some sort of voice in the creative direction, because it seems more of like having feedback after the festival, something where people can like comment on, but it's not from the beginning that they have kind of opportunity to intervene there. So that's it. Sorry. I am.
Was that the second? I just missed, I just lost my place.
Just first one.
That's primary.
That's what I thought. Who's second on this one?
I am.
Okay, Harold. So Harold, you're messing with me. Okay.
Anne Marie, are we ready for me? Yeah, okay. I somewhat share some of the concerns with Siri. As a practical matter, I don't know these people, but I'm familiar with their programming. And one of the things that I actually appreciate about what they're proposing doing is it's a 3-day festival that is multicultural and multidisciplinary. There's going to be a lot of programming activity going on. And I don't think that whoever wrote the grant did as well at identifying those key constituencies as they could have done. But what I happen to know about the programming is that it is very broad, but it's also very inclusive. And that's one of the, that's part of the beauty of a festival like this, because I think perhaps part of what Jake was addressing earlier, a want to be specific about your target and your constituency, but doing programming that is a large umbrella, it's a large tent. And that, for me, this festival actually does that and does a good job of it. I have known folks that have performed at this festival, and there are all kinds of folks. So it's equity and inclusion is kind of built into the festival itself. And that's about all of my comments.
Thank you. Any additional comments on this applicant? All right, if not, Anne Marie.
All right. That leads us to our final break of the day. So we've got 15 minutes. I'll see you back at 2 o'clock to start the recording. Thanks, Jesus. Next application up for review is Saltillo Sister Cities Committee. Melinda is the primary and Jake is the secondary. Let me pull up my timer. And whenever you're ready, you may begin.
All right, this proposal is the Austin Saltillo Sister Cities Association, which provides programs and events to serve the Austin and surrounding communities. The Sister Cities program is a people-to-people program introduced by President Eisenhower in '56, and the purpose of the program is to introduce the many cultures and to address national and international diplomacy. So my notes on this, the program proposed is definitely culturally relevant to the communities that are part of our mission. So Mexican, Mexican American, and maybe even the general Latinx community. However, those communities weren't identified as the key constituencies. Instead, the key constituencies is the Austin community at large. So I'm wondering about the special consideration of these communities. How will they benefit specifically? Still, the program and events definitely highlight Mexican and Mexican American art and culture, and thereby celebrate and promote it and help to preserve it. I see that reflected in the descriptions of their goals and in their activities. which there's a great, robust, and very exciting list of activities. It's very organized as well. So that the one thing that stood out was the high school students hosting. But again, I wonder, like, what's the key constituency there? Who is it open to? So on and so forth. I thought the community voice is streamlined through already existing committees, and I wondered how easy it is to capture, other voices in the community. And they have a good digital presence for marketing, promoting, and their programming. So.
Thank you. So yes, I largely agree. I found it to be a very robust list of programs that actually made me curious of what was essentially achievable or not, what was the highest priority, and what indeed was the constituencies for each program, really. Certain things served kind of exactly what you're saying. Certain things actually serve different groups. Some people are coming from Mexico, so this actually serves their community, introducing them to Austin culture. Meanwhile, a festival really is primarily for local Austin residents within Austin. So I do think that that was something of note. It does seem that they are financially responsible in this current iteration. Obviously, it's probably not the same people from the Eisenhower administration operating this, but the recent track record does seem to be proof of decent organization. I think that is, the essence of any critiques that I have are simply, maybe not receiving something that has been going for so long and then just simply assuming that it is great because it has been going on for so long. But do the programs that are presented actually respond to this contemporary moment and this contemporary community, as opposed to upholding a tradition, however well organized and ingrained it is?
Thank you. Any additional comments on this applicant? If not, Anne Marie.
Okay. The next application is Centro Americano Fest. Melinda is the primary and Siri is a secondary. Melinda, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay, so Centro Americano Fest is the only Central American singer-songwriter festival in the U.S. Initiated in 2005 in El Salvador, it was brought to Austin in 2011, and since then it has served as a cultural bridge between the Central American population that lives in Austin with the general Austin community and Central Texas cities. Since its beginnings, CACFest has brought the most iconic artists from Central American region and promoted other cultural expressions like dance, film, theater, and gastronomy. So this one, I noted that it had a long history of successful service to marginalized communities of Austin, specifically Central American communities. One of my concerns with this one, and I think this one I liked generally, loved the programming, but I noted that it focused a little bit too much on bringing art from abroad rather than from Austin artists. That was my main note on this one.
I scored this application in the higher end just because I think it's relevant in terms of the fact that within the Latinx or Hispanic communities, there is more representation from places like Mexico, for example. But actually and politically, the Central American population is at risk, immediate risk. And so I feel like that was such a relevant add to the cultural representation here. So I also was impressed by the history of service, and I just feel like it's relevant to have it here. And I see your point, Melinda. I didn't think about that, but I also think it helps to connect local and bringing, in a way, it creates that communication that it's also relevant culturally. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then I was going to add, based on what you said, that indeed, I think I may have done this one kind of early, but it does fill a gap that was not filled by some of these applications, which is there really is not enough representation of Central Americans. So yes, plus on that.
Thank you. Any additional comments? If not, Anne-Marie.
Okay, I just was going to make a quick comment that we do allow proposals to include importing artists and arts practitioners, musicians, bands, and things. So that is not a restriction of our funding programs. And yeah, I just wanted to mention that. All right, so next is Big Ol' Queer Market. Siri is the primary and Jake is the secondary. Siri, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Yes, so this proposal, I must mention that was the most, how do I say this? The person was so passionate in conveying their proposal. It was the most enthusiastic, I guess, voice that I read in the applications. So just wanted to mention that and like appreciate that. And this is the Big Ol' Queer Market is has happened once, and it's a pop-up style art fair that supported 134 local LGBTQIA plus artists, as it says in the proposal, which is very impressive. So I have the history is like short, but I can see how they have achieved already like such a big group of artists coming in. And I think the places where I started to score lower were related to somehow lack of clarity on what is the money going to be for. This is 75,000 requested, because there are options of renting a space or perhaps having more stable space. But I felt like there was, I would have appreciated more clarity on this is the proposal, this is the money for. So some of that lower the score in my end. And that's for now. Let me see if I have more, but for now, I will stop here.
Thank you. I echo your sentiment. There definitely is a tremendous amount of passion and energy. Something that really stood out to me, which I think is worthy of mention, in the history of service, which is recommending something that's really very recent. It's only, it's a very young event organization. Big Ol' Queer Market received over 150 applications for our first ever art fair, and none of them were turned down. So that is not just clarity about the target market, but saying these are the numbers. This is really the proof of a wider amount of opportunities, and this is the process that went into it, which I think is also unique in some of these applications. I think in terms of creating opportunities, this definitely seems to have some leadership. And I know that there is something to do with a profit incentive, of course, because these are artisans selling wares in a marketplace environment, and this person is working to create that. But it does seem like that incentive and that like structure of an event does not really get in the way of fulfilling the needs of the mandates of this grant application, which I also think is pretty cool. It seems like that is a difficult balancing act. And then finally, language accessibility is spoken of here in terms of spoken languages, but also for the deaf and hard of hearing, which is both critical and part of the Austin culture as well. So I think that was also worthy of pointing out. I thought that was a really specific, like a lot of time I keep saying, oh, I want more specificity. This definitely had specificity for a lot of the things that I was curious about.
Thank you. Any additional comments on this applicant? Yes, Harold?
I think among the issues that I had with this application is the track record and age, not age of a person, but the amount of experience that I was able to glean from the application. And the thing that I continue to be confused about was sometimes the tone was, we're looking to use this money to buy a space. Or are we looking for this money to do the programming? It's mentioned more than once, if we could just get this new space, and that was disconcerting to me. And also disconcerting was a $75,000 ask for an organization or individual that did not really, for me, show me that they've had time out in the community doing the work at a level that turn around and ask for $75,000 and not make it clear to me whether you were going to use that as a down payment to buy a property or not. The thing about buying property kept popping up, and I wasn't clear on really how they were going to use the money.
Thank you. Any additional comments? All right, not Anne Marie.
Okay, I was just going to make a couple of clarifications on some of the things mentioned in this review. So one, individuals in creative business category, the maximum request amount is 25,000. So if this applicant were to receive a score high enough to receive funds, the maximum award that they would receive is 25,000. It's possible that there was some confusion in terms of which funding category they fell into, which is fine. It's not an eligibility thing. Another point is that yes, as long as they have 1 year of experience, they are eligible to apply in Elevate. And so having just 1 year of experience is completely acceptable in this funding program. In terms of the usage of funds, for property purchases, that would not be an eligible expense in this program, and would probably, if this applicant were to score high enough to receive funding, the cultural funding staff would work with that applicant to find ways to use the funds in an eligible way, because the funds are set up in such a way so that they're for project-based funding in the Elevate program. And so any funds that are used and awarded would have to be used completely in the service of that one project. And so purchasing property would go well beyond that one activity, so therefore would not be an eligible expense. But that would be something that wouldn't necessarily disqualify them from receiving funds. It would just be a matter of revising budgets and putting funds in appropriate spending categories. Okay.
So I will circle back real quickly, Anne Marie, based on some comments and everything that's made. So based on the clarifications that Anne Marie just provided, I just want to make sure that what I still heard from the different comments was there being a lack of specificity on the project side and the details in what you received. I just want to make sure that I'm all on board with that level of clarity on that matter. Is that what I still heard from everyone who commented?
I think so. So for me, the $75,000 ask might have been a typo. They might have clicked the wrong box. More than that, my issue had to do with there seemed to be a lack of clarity on whether what they were going for was purchasing a permanent space, because they repeatedly talk about a permanent space or the program. And I think in one of the responses, it's and or is actually in the language, and that's probably.
Okay, thank you. Was there someone else wanted to respond or say anything additional, or I saw nods?
I just thinking on the future of Elevate or an iteration of Elevate, again, to think about how to tackle these issues of like someone asking for beyond what that there's or asking for the project of purchasing when that's not an expense, like how to be able to sort that out. But that being said, as I said, that enthusiastic proposal and it has a lot of positive things, but this is something that I would like to see how to like flesh out better in the next iteration, if there's any.
Thank you, Sari. Thank you, Harold. Anne Marie?
Okay. The next application is JKJK. Siri is the primary and Harold is the secondary. Siri, reset the timer. Right. Whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Yes, so JKJK are, they create theater performances that capture the queer experience and explore the heart of the human condition by centering joy and social justice. The idea is to present 2 workshop performances and 1 main stage show. They will present a workshop on a full production of Spring Creek Brook and a post-apocalyptic queer love story about climate change. And present a workshop of their play in progress, Always Boy, about self-harm in the queer community. I have this application scored in the high end. I do think it's really relevant, especially because they are embodying and portraying intersections that are really important to have in terms of ability, race, and sexual orientation in gender. And so I don't know these people personally, but I have seen some of their shows and I think they're amazing, and that this is something that the city would benefit from pretty much. So those are my comments.
I also scored this application well. I don't have a lot to add in terms of the programming. The thing that struck me is that they mentioned some areas of intersectionality that I think this is the only application that does mention neurodiversity. And they are including in their narrative answers fairly revealing things about themselves. It's a couple. There are 2 people, and they are generating art for public consumption, but it is very, very personally informed. And I think that is a good aspect of this, because I think that is going to let some of these people out there in the potential audience know that we're okay, and there's a group of people that are workshopping this play that's not quite ready yet, and here's an opportunity for you to have some input and early reviews and get the word back out. I think the only other thing that comes to mind, these folks seem to have good background individually, and because it's basically a 2-person partnership, I wonder how they might go about broadening their connection to their community and providing some opportunities for input. Otherwise, I scored the application well.
Thank you. Any additional comments on this applicant?
I do have a note here that I just saw about language accessibility. So if there is for the future ways to include accessibility of language, that would be great.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, Anne Marie.
Okay. The next application is Summer Break Theater. Harold is the primary, Siri is the secondary. Let me change the timer. Okay, Harold, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Summer Break Theater is requesting $23,000 to provide funding for their theater outreach in public schools, kindergarten through 12 in the Austin area. Part of what I think is a summer break, part of what I think is interesting about this proposal is that they are addressing their constituency is overtaxed public school teachers who might have creative leanings that they are not able to exert, that they're not able to work with. And this organization is trying to address that. Their goal is to produce original works by local Austin area playwrights with a strong emphasis on encouraging educators to perform. And I think that is a worthy goal for them to have. And they are partnered with Hyde Park Theater, which is an excellent community theater space that already has an audience, has a following. So I would wish them success in trying to address that target audience that they are going after. In terms of leadership and track record, I think that is well laid out in their responses. They plan to use this money in ways that would also help supplement income for these teachers by using funds that they are requesting from the city to help professionalize the people that they work with, actors, technicians, and such. So I didn't give them a perfect score, but I thought this was a good proposal, and none of the other proposals that I've read in this batch address that community as a very specific community. And I don't know how that really fits with the guidelines. There might be a question there for me. But I think that's a worthy constituent for someone to be doing programming for. And linking those people up with local playwrights and doing original material, I think is way cool. That's all I have to say right now.
Thank you, Harold. Yes, similarly, I also find this a very interesting project. It took me a minute actually to understand what their proposal was about, which might be useful to just mention as a feedback, because at the beginning I as a teacher myself, is like, there's no free time over the summer. You want these people to because I thought that they were like leading
Like,
kids. Yeah. But then it took me a minute to be, oh no, actually this is for the teachers. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. But like, if there's a way to put it more clearly, because it really took me a minute to like kind of understand what were they proposing. But I do think it's so relevant, especially because it offers the teachers, educators, a space for them to express their life experiences as teachers, the way that they tired, or issues that they have. And I also appreciate that this opportunity allows them to feel heard and seen. So in a way, it's like a like community sort of healing or something space for teachers and educators. And so I appreciate that. I think if anything beyond the clarity on the project itself, which if you read carefully and more than once, you would get it. It's maybe the possibility of having more diversity within the creative leadership, I would say. That would benefit the proposal for sure. And yeah, that's it from me.
I just have one more clarification
Mhm.
for what I said. I had pulled up my other screen and I was doing a quick scan again of their summary. This is not a program for doing this for kids in public school. And I think that I might have said outreach into K through 12, but that's not what I meant to say. I was doing a quick scan. Speaking.
Thank you.
Like the how it could improve in clarification of what the project is. Yeah.
Awesome. Any additional comments here? Right, if not, Anne Marie.
Okay, moving on to our final application to review for today. New Manifest Theater. Jake is the primary and Siri is the secondary. Let me reset the timer. And Jake, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Thank you. So the New Manifest Theater is requesting $25,000 in funding to support marketing, artist stipends, and production costs for the 5th annual Minifest Short Play Festival. This is a festival that encourages new works to have their Texas premieres. In addition to this program, there's a secondary program they're proposing funding for, which is basically a youth oratory festival. So speaking, poetry, materials such as that. From this application and the materials submitted, it does seem like they have a fairly decent track record for producing work. It does seem like they did have some difficulties during the pandemic period, and that is reflective in some of the frequency of production. And finally, not actually finally, from the materials submitted, it seems like they have demonstrated really good community standing. There seem to be a lot of relationships that are cited where there are either in-kind donations or the materials needed from other existing community partners to really make this work for their various cohorts. I think that is evidence of so far being able to really fulfill community needs with this festival of work. I think that essentially one of the only things that led me to no, there's one more thing before I wrap it up. They discuss intersectionality as well, but through a particular lens. I thought that was worthy of note. It was not general intersectionality in all of their programming materials, but it was referencing intersectionality through the specific issues of one of their past works, which was actually gun violence. So I thought that was interesting that they further defined intersectionality in the context of their program. I thought that was very specific. Yes, so finally, I think that the only thing that I really would request clarity on from this is this really looking for institutional support, and these programs and perhaps more will fall under just the general operations of this organization, which is what this grant will be used towards, or is the grant money in question really going towards these specific events, or one or the other, right? What is the priority? Are they automatically connected? There was some information I wanted from this application regarding that.
Yes, I agree with the last thing you said, Jake. I keep trying to figure out where their funds are going. But in general, I scored this application high. I think it's relevant. It's necessary for the community as an ensemble. I don't know either them personally, but I have seen the work that they've been doing, and I'm impressed by the service that they are already in motion with the community. I think maybe some points were lost in my end for language accessibility, specifically for the Minifest. And then this that Jake was saying of like 2 different projects and specifically the money as a startup for the oratorial was a little unclear to me. So but in general, I scored them high. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any additional comments on this application?
I just wanted to say that I thought that this was one of the better applications, especially for the kind of top level idea things of actually addressing the questions in language that ties directly back to the question that's being asked. I think they did a good job of that. It's not almost said breakdown, but could have been stronger with some more specificity on some of the issues of access and such as that. But I think the project is a good project and certainly worthy of funding.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, Anne Marie.
Okay, well, that concludes our day. Just to give a quick debrief for the applicants who are listening, are watching this recording at a later date. The awards will be announced in early September. Applicants may request comments and scores after award announcements have been made. And that's pretty much it for today. Tomorrow we'll have a panelist pre-session at 9:30. And then we'll open up again at 10 a.m. To review the last batch of, I want to say, 18 applications or so, thereabouts. Just eyeballing it. So that's it for today. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you all tomorrow.
Have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.